And pot sales, you know, they are big business for our state, but now even drug cartels are cashing in.
But now law enforcement is catching on. At Denver 7,
the FBI launched a massive statewide raid today on city and county offices and at Dannenbaum Engineering.
Agents stormed a remote safe house expecting nothing more than a cartel stash. They found $50 million packed into silent rooms, but the cash was only the beginning. One wall felt heavier than the rest, as if something inside it was pulling the air out of the house. When the breach team drove a blade into the drywall, every agent froze. A foul, trapped smell pushed through the crack. Whatever waited behind that wall was alive with horror, and it was nothing any of them were prepared to see. The raid, no one expected. The first sound was the explosion of the battering ram slamming into the locked office door. The noise hit the hallway like a violent shockwave. It was still dark outside, and the entire government building was supposed to be quiet. Only cleaning crews and night guards normally walked these halls at this hour. Yet the FBI pushed through the entrance with full force. The agents moved fast, and their boots struck the marble floor with sharp, heavy steps that echoed like warning shots. The building was meant for public service and lawmaking, not violent raids. This made the scene even more disturbing. The agents later described a sick feeling in their stomachs when they realized they were treating a government office the same way they treated cartel hideouts.
Everybody in this field office will play a vital part in ensuring that it's a safe event for everybody.
Their target was a senior legislative aide who worked closely with a respected state lawmaker. The FBI had kept him under quiet surveillance for weeks after noticing irregular patterns in state shipping records, unexplained late-night entries on his building access logs, and several unusual financial transfers connected to shell organizations that had no real offices or staff. Agents also discovered that he had repeatedly visited restricted areas inside the building without any clear reason. They watched him arrive at unpredictable hours and observed him leaving through side exits that staff rarely used. These patterns did not fit the behavior of a normal government employee. They signaled someone who was hiding something. The FBI did not want to move until they were certain, but the final warning sign came when they intercepted a courier manifest linked to his office that did not match any approved state delivery. The shipment had no sender information, no digital signature, and had been routed through a suspicious private carrier that was already under investigation. At that point, the agents knew they had enough to act. To many people, he looked like a man who represented fairness and responsibility. That belief collapsed the moment agents entered his office. The room looked harmless at first glance. There were framed family photos, awards for community work, and children's drawings that were taped to the wall from past school visits. The surface of his desk was clean. Nothing appeared out of place. The entire room looked like it belonged to a dedicated public servant. Then the agents saw the plain courier box sitting in the center of the conference table. It looked normal, but something about it felt wrong. When they opened it, they froze. Inside were 8 kilograms of cocaine wrapped so tightly that the bricks bulged against the plastic. The cocaine was the same quality used by major cartels.
On 50 packages, 2.2 pounds per package, so about 110 pounds, with a value of about $1.5 million.
Under the bricks was a ghost number handgun. This kind of weapon has no traceable serial number. Under the gun was a stack of cash bound with rubber bands. The bundles contained $39,000. Each bundle was wrapped in the exact style used by street-level distributors. Veteran agents felt a rising tension as they stared at the contents. One of them whispered that this felt different from any drug seizure he had done inside a city home.
This is what we would definitely call up into a Tier 1 type level drug transaction.
This was inside the heart of state government. A discovery like this could not be accidental. It meant someone with direct access to lawmakers and classified discussions was involved in organized crime. The aide was found standing in the hallway. He looked frozen. His body was stiff, and his hands trembled as they were placed in handcuffs. He said nothing. Security logs showed he entered the building at 4:15 in the morning. This was hours before any staff normally arrived. The FBI realized he had come early to move something before anyone could see him. One agent looked at the courier box again and said in a low voice that this was not a drug case. This was infiltration, and once they opened his encrypted laptop, they learned he was not working alone. The laptop that shouldn't exist. The aide's laptop sat on the metal table like a piece of evidence dragged out of a war zone. The room was silent except for the hum of cooling fans and the slow movement of agents taking their positions. When a forensic technician pressed the power button, the screen lit up with a black background and a single blinking cursor. There was no login page and no welcome screen. The machine looked nothing like a normal government device. One agent stared at the screen. "This looks like something built for classified work," he said quietly. Another agent shook his head. A staffer should never touch a system like this. The technicians began their work. They tried every standard tool they had, but the laptop fought back. It was protected by layers of encryption strong enough to erase the entire drive if someone entered the wrong command.
They need to pay the people that did it, and if some people don't get money, some people die.
The agents watched the struggle with growing concern. The aide was never given access to anything close to this level of technology. Something about the situation felt wrong in a way none of them could ignore. Hours passed before the first layer finally cracked. When the technicians unlocked the hidden directories, the room froze. The screen filled with folders. They looked harmless at first. Health outreach, rural supplies, infrastructure review, grant finalization. Each title suggested normal government work. When the technicians opened them, the truth came out fast. The health outreach documents held shipment logs for narcotics. The rural supply folders showed transport routes for fentanyl and meth hidden inside legitimate state deliveries. The infrastructure memos detailed paths designed to move illegal shipments through inspection areas without triggering searches. The grant approvals were fake. They had been created to cover the costs of moving drugs through official channels.
Our territorial waters are a free-for-all, really. It's like the Wild West out there.
A wave of disbelief moved through the room. Just then, an analyst clicked on an encrypted message. The words on the screen were short: removal confirmed. The room went completely silent. Everyone knew what removal meant in cartel language. It meant a killing that had been approved and scheduled. One agent whispered, "He is not just moving drugs. He is making decisions about who gets erased." The technicians opened another directory and found a digital map. Dozens of hidden addresses spread across the Southwest. Each one had been disguised inside government paperwork and approved through the aide's office. The agents stared at the map in shock. The more they opened, the clearer the pattern became. The laptop contained the blueprint of a hidden network. It reached into multiple states and used public systems to move illegal shipments without detection. As the analysts kept decoding the files, the map exposed every warehouse, shell company, and transport hub that the FBI would soon prepare to raid next. Operation Crosscut.
Man, leave them alone.
This morning, 2 new major American cities now in the crosshairs.
Operation Crosscut began at exactly 2:30 in the morning. Every location on the target list came directly from the aide's decrypted network map. The map revealed the real structure of the cartel's hidden operations in a way that stunned even the senior analysts. Warehouses, farms, charity centers, and small garages were all connected through false paperwork and forged government approvals. Nothing about the network looked improvised. Everything had been built slowly and carefully. Agents described the map as a blueprint for a second society that had been constructed inside their own country without any public knowledge. Dozens of tactical teams deployed at the same moment. Helicopters lifted off from secure sites. Armored vehicles rolled out of federal garages. Federal agents tightened their vests, checked their rifles, and took their last breaths before entry. The atmosphere felt thick and heavy. Everyone understood that these were not isolated criminals. They were attacking a system that had been allowed to grow in silence for years.
Agents say by early morning Sunday, around half of those attendees had left in handcuffs.
The first target was a construction supply warehouse near San Antonio. The outer appearance suggested a normal business. Forklifts sat on the loading dock. Coffee cups were left near stacked lumber. When the agents breached the main entrance, they expected a chaotic scramble. Instead, they walked into still air and rows of pallets. The pallets held boxes labeled as vitamin supplements. When the technicians cut them open, the truth showed itself. Solid bricks of cocaine and fentanyl filled the containers. Each brick had been wrapped with professional precision. Anyone who glanced at the boxes would have believed the warehouse supplied health products. The second target was a stretch of storage units in Laredo. Families used most of the units to store holiday lights, old furniture, and childhood keepsakes they never wanted to throw away. The cartel had taken advantage of this. Several units in the middle row had false walls. Behind those walls were barrels of industrial precursor chemicals used to manufacture illegal drugs on a large scale. The barrels were arranged with care, each sealed and labeled with altered codes. When the boards were pulled up, the agents saw a full mechanical line designed to move narcotics directly into waiting trucks. The trucks had been funded through state agricultural grants. The conveyor looked new and had been built with careful engineering. The sight created a deep sense of unease because it showed how far the infiltration had spread. Then came East Austin, where everything exploded. The alley behind a row of garages erupted into gunfire the moment agents moved in. A group of suspects ran out of a side door with rifles already raised. The first shots cracked through the air and punched into metal doors behind the agents. Helicopters dropped so low that the rotor wash sent trash cans sliding across the pavement. The blades shook the garage doors so violently that the hinges rattled. Muzzle flashes lit the alley in bursts of white and orange. Bullets hit brick walls and sent chips of concrete flying. Agents fired back with controlled bursts. Sparks jumped from the asphalt when rounds struck the ground. One suspect tried to hide behind a dumpster, but the metal tore apart when rounds passed through it. Another suspect ran for a fence, but agents cut him off before he reached the corner. The attack lasted for 9 full minutes.
When he finally stopped, he tried to run off doing that acrobatic flip. He ran into a field.
The agents described those 9 minutes as the longest of their careers. By sunrise, the teams had recovered more than a ton of narcotics, dozens of weapons and ledgers filled with coded initials of complicit officials. The initials repeated across the logs. Analysts matched them to someone far more powerful than a staffer. The initials belonged to a federal judge, and his involvement pushed the investigation into a darker and far more dangerous territory. The judge who wasn't working alone. The safe house sat miles outside city limits, where cell signals weakened and the roads narrowed to dirt. Thick cedar and mesquite trees surrounded the property so completely that the house could not be seen from the road. It was the kind of location that would never draw attention unless someone knew exactly where to look. The FBI knew only because the aide's encrypted logs had labeled it as primary site. The same nonprofit used in the financial trails of both officials owned the property. That alone told the agents that the site mattered. As the tactical convoy approached, the first sign of danger appeared. A thermal drone detected 4 heat signatures around the property. 2 sat in the tree line near the north fence. 1 stood on the porch pretending to be a groundskeeper. Another sat inside a parked pickup truck with tinted windows. All were armed. The house was not abandoned or quiet. It was defended. The FBI deployed quietly, spreading around the property in a wide arc. A signal jamming unit shut down the safe house's outgoing communication, so the guards could not warn anyone. When the first team moved forward, the guard in the truck spotted movement and drew his rifle. He fired 3 rounds toward the dirt road. The rounds sliced through the tree branches. Agents returned fire immediately. The guard fell against the door of the truck. The porch guard reacted next. He fired through the railing as he backed into the entryway. His shots struck the side of an armored vehicle and sent fragments of stone flying. Agents swept to the porch, forced him down, and cleared the doorway. In the yard, the guards in the trees opened fire. One used a scoped rifle. The flashes lit the brush in short bursts. The agents pushed forward through the dust and branches and managed to neutralize both men. With the perimeter cleared, the entry team stacked on the door. The front entrance looked like normal wood, but when the breaching ram hit it, the sound was metallic. The door had been reinforced with hidden steel plates. It took 3 heavy strikes before it gave way. Inside, the air felt strangely cold and dry. The house had no furniture. There were no beds, no dishes, no clothing, and no signs that anyone lived there. It felt like a warehouse disguised as a home. Thick plastic coverings lined the walls. Reinforced studs were visible behind thin layers of paint. Electrical panels had been expanded far beyond what a normal residence needed. The first large room explained everything. Stacks of cash filled the space from wall to wall. Each bundle was vacuum sealed and marked with dates and routing numbers. The humidity in the room was controlled by industrial-grade units installed directly into the walls. After the initial count, the estimate reached $50 million. The agents stared in silence. One finally whispered, "This is not stash money. This funds the entire network." In the next room, surveillance monitors covered an entire wall. The screens showed live feeds of rural highways, municipal parking lots, border-adjacent roads, and even the entrances of several public buildings. Every camera was positioned to track law enforcement patterns and delivery schedules. The setup confirmed that this house was not a storage location. It was a command center. Then the agents noticed fresh construction marks. New plaster-covered sections of the walls. Some studs were reinforced with metal plates. The paint did not match the original structure. Several panels sounded heavier when tapped. None of this matched the architectural plans from county records. An agent placed his hand against one section of drywall and knocked. It did not echo. It sounded dense, weighted, wrong. Something had been sealed inside, and breaking that wall open would expose the true horror of the entire network. The hidden wall. The FBI breached the wall expecting to find more cash, maybe another hidden storage chamber. Instead, The first section of drywall collapsed outward, and the room fell completely silent. What spilled out did not belong in any house. It did not belong in any country that believed its institutions were safe. Behind the drywall were resin-encased bodies. Each one was sealed in a hardened block. Each block had a label embedded in the resin. The labels matched the word used in the encrypted messages on the aide's laptop: removal. The bodies were victims who had resisted orders or refused to cooperate. Their faces were frozen in the final moments before they disappeared. The agents stared at the blocks in shock because they now understood the word removal had never been an empty threat. It had been a documented part of the system. A second cavity was opened, and hard drives slid out of the insulation. The drives were wrapped in protective material. When the technicians powered them up, the screens filled with blackmail recordings. They showed officials in meetings they believed were private. They showed conversations about approvals, money exchanges, and threats. They showed the fear on the faces of people who understood that saying no would put them on a list. The recordings were organized with dates, locations, and names. Everything was cataloged like evidence inside a personal archive. In the next section of the wall, the agents found a soundproof chamber. The walls were thick. The floor had steel drainage grates. Restraints were bolted into the studs. This room had not been used for storage. It had been used for intimidation, forced confessions, and executions. The smell inside was stale and sour, as if the air had not moved in months. One agent stepped back and refused to enter the chamber because the space felt like something that should never have existed in a private home. A Santa Muerte shrine rested behind another panel. Dried blood flecks covered the base. Candles had melted into the floor. The shrine was surrounded by markings scratched into the drywall. They were warnings meant only for those who worked inside the network. Agents photographed everything because they understood they had uncovered the internal rituals of a group that believed it would never be exposed. Then they found the ledgers. Each page contained lists of officials. Each name was marked as secured, compromised, or scheduled. Scheduled meant targeted for removal. Compromised meant under control. Secured meant fully cooperating. The ledgers proved the infiltration had been organized and deliberate. The darkest discovery came next. Inside a locked metal box hidden under the insulation, agents found folders containing school records, family photos, and home addresses of children connected to public officials. The files included bus routes, schedules, and playground layouts. The cartel had used these children as leverage to force compliance from adults who tried to resist. As the agents examined the files, a photograph taped to the inner lid of the box caught their attention. It showed a teenage schoolgirl. Her face had been crossed out with a thick black X. Her disappearance had gone viral only a week earlier. News reports claimed she had fled home with her boyfriend after a family argument. Her father worked in the legal system and had been interviewed briefly about her sudden decision to run. Now the agents understood that the news story had been a lie. She had not run. She had been taken. When they lifted the photograph, they found writing in red marker on the back. The message said, "Stop asking for more." This sentence explained everything. Her father had tried to demand more money from the cartel. He had pushed them too far, and they had punished him by taking his daughter. The photograph made it clear that his public statements had been forced. His pleas in the news were not for a runaway child. They were for a hostage he knew he could not save without obeying the people who controlled him. The agents realized that the cartel had not only targeted officials, they had targeted their families to guarantee silence. One agent ran outside and vomited in the grass. Another stood frozen with his hands shaking. A senior agent whispered, "This wasn't a safe house. This was an execution archive." The dark truth. When the walls were emptied and the last body bag was sealed, the agents understood that the investigation was no longer about evidence. It was about survival. The truth was out. The system had been compromised from inside, and the people who built the network were still moving. The first order was simple: find the senior aide, find the judge, bring them in before they could disappear. But the search shifted immediately when federal teams reached their known locations. Both men were gone. Their phones had been destroyed. Their vehicles were missing. Their bank accounts had been emptied. Someone with access to restricted systems had given them a warning. Someone inside law enforcement had helped them flee. That realization hit the command room harder than anything found behind the walls. Corruption was not sitting in one office or one courtroom. It was threaded through the agencies responsible for defending the country. The agents understood what that meant. This was not the end of a case. It was the beginning of a conflict that would not be contained by borders or departments. The cartel war that had taken millions of lives was far from ending because the cartels were not fighting alone. They were backed by people with badges, titles, and authority, people who were expected to stand for justice but had chosen to stand for profit. The truth was clear. The fight ahead would not be simple. It would not be clean. It would not be quick. They were not hunting criminals hiding in shadows. They were hunting criminals hiding inside the system, and somewhere beyond the tree line, protected by people who had sworn oaths they no longer honored. The aide and the judge were running deeper into a network that was willing to kill anyone who tried to stop them. Thank you for staying with us to the end. Please subscribe for more engaging content like this.